This is a hobby author publishing presentation, where my hobby is your entertainment.
Welcome back to Shadows of Secrets. The city suffers, the Meister rules, but a single spark of defiance has been lit in the darkness. An alliance has been forged between Gerrod, the exiled ranger, and Rylan, the reluctant leader. But an idea is not a revolution. Hope is not an army. Now comes the hard part, waking the city. Today, in Chapter 5, Rebellion's Awakening, Rylan must embrace his new role and gather the scattered embers of dissent into a raging fire. They will move in the shadows, striking at the heart of the guild's power. But with every victory, the danger grows.
Chapter 5. Rebellion. Rylan's boots scraped against the damp cobblestones as he paced the narrow alley, the stench of refuse and sweat thickening the air. The walls closed in, pressing in on the invisible hands of those who controlled hospitality's fate. The distant murmur of the city, alive with commerce and deceit, seemed like a cold mockery of the suffering and blood of the servants. It still hear the cries of the oppressed, desperate pleas for mercy never ended. Units had grown fat with blood and hunger, their iron grip tightening with every passing day. Rylan's fists clenched, his nails digging into the palms of his hands. He could almost feel the chains around his own wrists, though they were not visible. The flickering light from the nearby lantern cast distorted shadows across his face. In the gloom, Rylan's eyes mingled with something endless. A spark of rebellion. Knowing that the realization sank him, he was no different from this. He was content to stand in the shadows, watching the city burn, but not at all. Whispers stirred the battles of the call to action. Its reign would not last forever. Not even insane. The slow breath filled his lungs, steadying the storm of air. Rylan leaned against the crumbling stone wall, the scent of damp earth soothed his aching lungs. There was a rift nearby, once proud to be sagging its edge. The city's crumbling beneath. Beneath it, hidden in shadow, a rusted grate stood ajar. Sewer access. Gerrod's message had been brief, its meaning clear. Careful timing. The meeting had to align with the lull between patrols, just before the twilight shift doubled the watch. Any mistake, and they'd be cornered before they spoke a word. Rylan listened, the muffled clang of boots on cobblestones fading toward the main thoroughfare, the last of the daylight slipping behind the rooftops. He exhaled. Now, a flicker of movement. A hooded figure stepped from the mill's darkened archway, posture tense, eyes sharp beneath the cowl. Gerrod. Rylan pushed off the wall, falling into step beside him. No greetings, no wasted words. Here, beyond the reach of polite society, caution was currency. Gerrod's footfalls echoed softly in the narrow alley, each step heavy with purpose. His green eyes swept over the shadows where Rylan lingered, the distant lantern light flickering across his tense features. He had seen that look before. The fire in his eyes, the weight of something about to break free. The resistance Rylan had sparked wasn't just rumors anymore. It was real. "You've started something, Rylan," Gerrod said, his voice a quiet mix of concern and inevitability. He crossed his arms, his gaze narrowing. "Something bigger than either of us." Rylan stiffened, but didn't turn. He kept his eyes on the ground, as though the cobblestones would somehow offer him an answer. The faint hiss of wind through the alley was the only sound, but the tension between them thickened with each passing moment. "I didn't mean to," Rylan muttered, his voice low. "It was never supposed to be this big." Gerrod stepped closer, the flickering flame of the lantern illuminating the hard lines of his face. "You can't stop it now," he said. "But you need to understand something." He hesitated, his heart twisting. "You may not always have us by your side. The more you push, the further apart we'll become." Rylan looked up, his eyes dark with uncertainty. Gerrod's words cut deeper than any blade, but he said nothing more. There was nothing more to say. The rebellion was already unfolding, and soon their paths would diverge.
Gerrod's gaze softened, but his tone remained firm as he took a step closer to Rylan, the distance between them closing like a tightening noose. You can't keep hiding from it, Rylan. His voice, steady and calm, carried a weight that pressed against Rylan's chest. The people are looking to you now. You've given them hope, even if you never meant to. They see something in you, something more than the man you think you are. Rylan's shoulders stiffened, his eyes darting away as if the words burned. I'm not a leader, Gerrod. I never asked for this. I'm just one man. What do they expect of me? Gerrod's jaw tightened. He stepped even closer, the firelight casting sharp shadows across his face. They expect you to be more than just a man. They expect you to be their voice, their strength. His voice dropped, growing more intense. It's not just about you anymore. It's about them, the people you've already inspired. They'll follow you, whether you want them to or not. Rylan shifted uneasily, his hands clenching into fists at his sides. But I'm not ready for this. I can't. I don't know how. Gerrod's eyes locked onto Rylan's, unwavering. You don't have to know everything. You just have to decide. Will you stand by them? Or turn your back and let this all fall apart? The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Rylan's breath quickened, his pulse pounding in his ears. The weight of it all pressed down, pushing him closer to a decision he couldn't escape. Rylan's fingers trembled as he ran them through his hair, frustration tightening his chest. His gaze flicked to the ground, avoiding Gerrod's steady eyes. I don't know, Gerrod, he muttered, his voice tight with doubt. What if I'm wrong? What if I'm leading them to failure? Gerrod's silence stretched between them like a taut rope, and Rylan's doubts only grew heavier with each passing second. The thought of so many lives resting on his shoulders, on a man who didn't even feel sure of his own path, churned his stomach. You really think I'm the one they need? Rylan's voice cracked, raw with vulnerability. I'm just as lost as they are. I've never led anyone. I can barely lead myself. Gerrod's eyes softened, though there was a flicker of something darker behind them, something Rylan couldn't quite place. The wind picked up, tugging at their cloaks, carrying with it the scent of rain. You're not the only one who doubts himself, Rylan, Gerrod replied quietly. I've walked this road too. Not all of us are born with the answers, but that doesn't mean we turn our backs when the people need us. A bitter laugh escaped Rylan, hollow and bitter. And what about you, Gerrod? What do you want out of all this? You've always been running, hiding in the shadows. If I take charge, what happens to you? Gerrod's expression hardened, his jaw clenched. I'm here because I believe in you. And maybe it's time you believed in yourself. The words hung between them, but the answer was still elusive. Rylan closed his eyes, the weight of his doubts pushing against the truth he couldn't quite grasp. Gerrod's hand landed firmly on Rylan's shoulder, a silent reassurance that cut through the tension. His voice was low but steady. I'm not going anywhere. Not yet. The words seemed to settle in the space between them, a promise, though a fragile one. I'll help you build this, help you make it something the guilds can't crush. You won't have to do this alone. Rylan looked up, searching Gerrod's face for any sign of doubt, but there was none. The resolve in his eyes was unyielding, unwavering, like the roots of an ancient tree. It was that trust, that weight of commitment, that made Rylan feel even smaller in his uncertainty. But when the time comes, I won't stay, Gerrod added, his voice softening just enough to let Rylan hear the weight of it. There's someone else I have to find, someone I've been searching for a long time. I won't leave you, not now, but I won't be here forever. Rylan's heart sank, a sharp pang of something unfamiliar twisting within him. A part of him wanted to argue, to demand Gerrod's stay, to cling to the certainty of his presence. But he knew deep down, that this was always how it was going to be. Gerrod was a man of duty, of personal quests. He couldn't stay in one place for long. I'll do my part, Rylan, Gerrod continued, his grip tightening for a moment. But the rest is on you. You have what it takes. Don't doubt that. Rylan nodded, though the words barely reached him. The bond between them was solid, but the future loomed, unwritten, uncertain. And as much as he wanted to cling to Gerrod's presence, he knew the day would come when he'd have to stand on his own. Rylan's breath caught in his throat, the weight of Gerrod's words settling over him like a mantle. His hands trembled, and for a moment he wanted to run, to step back, to ignore the growing call of the people's hopes, to ignore the responsibility he felt gnawing at his gut. But the weight of the rebellion was already pressing down on him, like the rumble of a storm gathering in the distance. He exhaled slowly, his chest tight, then met Gerrod's gaze. There was no turning back now. "I'll do it," he said, his voice barely a whisper, but it rang out with the gravity of his decision. "I'll lead them. He swallowed hard, his throat dry. "I'll make sure it counts." Gerrod's gaze softened, a flicker of approval in his eyes. "That's all anyone can ask." Rylan nodded, his hands clenching into fists. The path ahead wasn't clear, and every step felt uncertain, but the movement had already begun. He could feel the momentum building around him, like the pulse of a living thing. The whispers of the oppressed, the hopes of the forgotten, they all rested on him now. A tremor ran through him as the weight of it fully settled in. There was no going back. The people were waiting, and he would be their voice, their leader, whether he was ready or not. He had no choice now but to embrace the storm. Rylan moved through the alleys of Oswagonia with practiced ease, the shadows swallowing him whole. The air hummed with the ceaseless bustle of the city, market stalls bursting with goods, merchants shouting for attention, the clink of coin changing hands. It was a facade of life, vibrant and thriving, but beneath it, the rot of oppression festered. He knew the city well, every crooked turn, every hidden corner. But today, those shadows had a new meaning. His eyes darted from figure to figure, assessing each with a mix of caution and curiosity. Who among them could be trusted? Who would be a danger to the cause? There was no time to waste. Word of the rebellion was already leaking out, and it was only a matter of time before the guilds caught wind. He stopped near a corner where a ragged man with a hood too large for his frame leaned against the wall, his eyes darting nervously. Rylan approached, his footsteps soundless, as though the shadows themselves guided him. "You know the city," Rylan said quietly, his tone firm but not threatening. "You know who might help and who might hinder." The man hesitated, his lips dry, but desperation flickered in his eyes. "What's in it for me?" Rylan's gaze was unwavering, a chance to fight back, to finally be something other than cattle to the guilds. The man's eyes searched Rylan's face, weighing the words, and after a long moment, he nodded. "I know a few, but if you're serious, you'll need more than words." Rylan's chest tightened, but he masked it with a firm nod. "I'll need them all, and you'll be the first of many." The alley seemed to stretch before him, full of faces half hidden in the gloom, and each one was a possible ally, a possible threat. Rylan's steps quickened. The rebellion was growing, and he would need every one of them if they were brave enough to stand with him. The clang of hammer on anvil rang through the smithy, echoing off the stone walls like a heartbeat of the city itself. Rylan stood in the doorway, watching the smith work, the sweat glistening on his brow as he shaped the glowing metal. The heat from the forge radiated, mingling with the sharp, metallic scent of the air. The smith paused, lifting his heavy tongues and glancing over at Rylan with a wary eye. The silence stretched, thick with uncertainty, before the smith spoke. "What's a man like you want in a place like this?" Rylan stepped closer, his boots scraping the stone floor, the creak of his cloak the only sound. "I'm looking for those willing to fight back," he said, his voice low but steady, eyes locking with the smith's. "The guilds won't stop until they've bled this city dry. You've seen it, haven't you?" The smith's face hardened, his brow furrowing as he set the tongues down. "I've seen enough. I've seen good men break for scraps. I've seen families starve while the guilds grow fat." He wiped his brow with a grimy cloth, his large hands shaking slightly. "But I'm no soldier boy. This is just a smithy." Rylan took another step forward, his gaze unwavering. "We all have a part to play. Your skills can build the weapons, the armor, but we need more than steel. We need numbers. We need people willing to stand. You can be one of them. Help gather others like you. It starts small, but it'll grow." The smith stared at him for a long moment, his eyes dark with doubt. But then, slowly, he nodded. "I'll think on it. It's not an easy thing, but I'll help where I can. There's a few I know. We'll talk." Rylan offered a small nod of gratitude. "We don't have much time. The guilds are watching, but together we can make them fear us." The smith hesitated before returning to his work, the clatter of metal resuming. But the look he gave Rylan was different now, less guarded, more calculating. a step towards something bigger. Gerrod sat in the shadow of a weathered cart, hood low, eyes steady on the gate. He had watched since dawn, unmoving, as the city moved around him. Guards paced their routes, hands resting on sword hilts, their expressions bored but vigilant. Shifts changed at regular intervals, efficient, seamless, except for one. Near sundown, a weary guard stretched, rolled his shoulders, then ducked into a side alcove. A break. Routine. The others, preoccupied with their own shift change, never covered the gap. Gerrod moved. A swift step past a stacked barrel, a pivot along the blind side of a supply wagon. The alcove was narrow, shadowed. He slid through, pressing against the cold stone as the lazy guard finished pissing and strolled back, none the wiser. A voice stopped him just past the gate. "How did you—" Gerrod turned. A wiry man in a threadbare cloak, sharp-eyed, skeptical, watched him from the alley's edge. A rebel, by the look of him. Gerrod shrugged. "It's like tracking deer near a salt lick. Predictable patterns." The man exhaled, shaking his head. "Hells, and here we've been breaking heads for coin just to bribe a way through." Gerrod said nothing, but the seed had been planted. Rylan stood at the edge of the makeshift training ground, the flickering light of a nearby fire casting long shadows over the gathered recruits. Their faces were a mix of determination and uncertainty, eyes darting nervously as they awaited his instruction. The weight of responsibility settled heavy on his shoulders. These weren't seasoned fighters. They were ordinary folk, pulled from the fringes of the city, and now they were his to protect. He drew his sword, the steel gleaming faintly in the firelight, and addressed them. "The guilds won't play fair. They'll strike in the dark, from behind. You need to learn to move like shadows, quiet, unseen. If they find you before you find them, it's over." A young woman, barely more than a girl, stepped forward, eyes wide with apprehension. "How do we fight them if we can't see them first?" Rylan met her gaze, his voice low but steady. "You fight with what you have, your senses, your instincts, and the training you'll get here. We'll teach you to strike from the shadows, to make every movement count." He moved fluidly, demonstrating a series of swift, calculated moves. How to step lightly, how to strike with precision. The recruits watched, some nodding, others biting their lips in concentration. "You'll need to stay low, keep your weapons close," he continued, circling them now. "One wrong move could get you killed, but it's not just about how you fight. It's about knowing when to fight." The young woman nodded slowly, a flicker of understanding crossing her face. Rylan's eyes swept across the group, his heart heavy with the weight of what he was asking. He wasn't just training them to fight. He was training them to survive in a world that would crush them without hesitation. And if they couldn't fight back, they'd be nothing more than another casualty in the guild's endless war. Keep your eyes sharp, move like you belong in the shadows, and above all else, remember this. You fight to protect each other. That's how we'll win. The merchant's apprentice shifted uneasily, his hands fidgeting with the frayed edge of his tunic. His wide eyes darted to the other recruits, then back to Rylan, his voice trembling with uncertainty. "What if they find out? What if the guilds come for us?" His voice cracked, the weight of fear evident in every syllable. "What if it's not worth it? What if we're all just feeding them more bodies to bury?" Rylan stood still, his face a mask of calm, though his mind was whirring. The question hung in the air, thick and suffocating, the anxiety of the apprentice bleeding into the cold evening air. He'd seen this fear before, felt it himself in darker times. He stepped forward, his boots silent on the dirt as he crouched down to the apprentice's level. "You're not alone in this," Rylan said, his voice low, steady. "The guilds have power, but power is fragile. If they silence us now, they're not just killing men, they're killing hope. We're fighting for something bigger than ourselves." The young man shifted uncomfortably, his hands wringing in his lap. "But what if it's not enough?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "What if we fight and still lose?" Rylan's eyes hardened, his gaze unyielding as the weight of the question hit him square in the chest. "We don't fight because we're guaranteed to win. We fight because we have no other choice. The guilds already control everything. Our lives, our families, our futures. What's the point of staying silent when silence is death?" The apprentice swallowed hard, his gaze flicking to the others who were still training in the distance. A quiet murmur of doubt lingered, but Rylan's words had struck deep. The cost of silence was clear. "You'll have to decide if you're willing to risk everything," Rylan continued, standing upright. "But remember, you're not fighting alone. This rebellion, this movement, it's our chance. Don't waste it." Rylan stood before the group, his eyes sweeping over each face, measuring the weight of what he was about to say. The flickering firelight cast sharp shadows, as if the darkness itself was pressing in closer. He straightened, the steel of his resolve shining through his every word. "Listen carefully," he began, his voice firm, yet not unkind. "This isn't just about fighting. This is about survival. If the guilds learn of us, everything we've built, everything we've worked for, will be destroyed in an instant." The recruits stood in tense silence, the weight of his words sinking deep into their hearts. They were still fresh to the cause, still naive in many ways. Rylan could see it. The uncertainty in their eyes, the flicker of doubt, the fear of being crushed by forces far greater than them. "Secrecy is our shield," Rylan continued, pacing slowly before them. "We trust only those who are with us. No one else, not family, not friends, no one outside this group can know what we're doing. One loose tongue could mean the end of everything." A quiet murmur rippled through the crowd, and Rylan's gaze sharpened, catching the eyes of a young man at the front. "I mean it," he said, his voice low but unyielding. "You break that trust, and you risk us all." The young man stiffened, but didn't speak. Rylan's gaze softened just enough to let him know there was no judgment, only responsibility. "This is a fight for freedom," he said, his voice more solemn now. "But it's also a fight for our lives. We don't have the luxury of mistakes. We don't have the luxury of half-heartedness." The fire crackled behind him, casting flickering light over the recruits, the warmth of it doing little to ease the chill in the air. Rylan's eyes narrowed, his voice growing more intense. "You've all made the decision to stand with us. You've all chosen to take the risk. But understand this: loyalty, secrecy, and trust are everything. Break one, and the whole thing crumbles." He paused, letting the gravity of his words sink in. His chest tightened, and though he didn't say it aloud, the unspoken truth hung in the air. There was no turning back. The movement was growing, the stakes were rising, and if they wanted to survive the guild's wrath, they had to be tighter than steel, silent as shadows. "Do you understand?" Rylan asked, his voice barely above a whisper. One by one, they nodded, their eyes filled with the same determination that now burned in Rylan's chest. Rylan moved through the city's forgotten underbelly with purpose, his boots echoing softly against the damp stone beneath him. The air was thick with the musty scent of age, the walls of the tunnels slick with moisture. He had walked these paths before, years ago, when they were little more than memories of a time before Oswagonia's rise. Now, they served a different purpose, a lifeline, a shadowed path that could shield the rebellion from the guild's watchful eyes. His fingers brushed against the cool stone as he passed, instinctively mapping every twist and turn, every hidden alcove and cracked passageway. He had learned this city's secrets long ago, but now those secrets would become his weapons. He paused before a narrow archway, half hidden behind a collapsed heap of rubble. The space was small, barely wide enough for two people to walk side by side, but it was hidden well. He knelt, tracing a faded symbol etched into the stone, a marker he'd placed years ago, long before he knew how important these tunnels would become. This was one of the routes he'd need, a path that could lead them out of sight when the guilds inevitably came hunting. He stood again, his mind already at work, planning, calculating. His eyes darted across the maps he'd created in his mind over the years, each hidden route, every secret door, every forgotten space. "These will keep us safe," he muttered to himself. "These will keep us ahead." He drew his cloak tighter around him, the shadows welcoming him like an old friend. There were more passages to map, more hidden rooms to find, but each one was another step toward the rebellion's survival. He could already see it, the faces of the recruits, their eyes full of purpose. The tunnels would be their refuge, their means of escape, and their headquarters. As he retraced his steps through the dim, forgotten spaces, he envisioned how they would use the passages to avoid the guild's spies, to strike with speed and vanish before retaliation could take hold. Each tunnel was a lifeline, each forgotten doorway a hidden weapon. He would use them all, no stone, no shadow left unexamined. The rebellion would rise from the depths, and Rylan would make sure they had the roots to strike and vanish, to live and fight another day. Rylan slipped into the candlelit chamber beneath the old apothecary, the air thick with the scent of dust and damp stone. 3 figures waited, their expressions tense but resolute. Marta leaned against a wooden table, arms crossed, her sharp eyes tracking his every move. Phelan, silent as ever, sat with his hands steepled beneath his chin, while Lexia busied herself tracing unseen patterns across the table's surface, her fingers restless. "We don't have time for hesitation," Rylan said, shutting the heavy door behind him. "The guilds are tightening their grip, and if we don't move carefully, they'll crush us before we gain ground." He laid a rough map of Oswagonia across the table, tapping his finger against the key districts. "We need weapons, food, medicine, and we need them without drawing attention." Marta scoffed. "Easier said than done. The guilds watch every coin that changes hands. If we take too much, too fast, they'll notice." Phelan finally spoke, his voice low, measured. "Small shipments, spread out. We don't steal from the same source twice. Keep the pattern irregular." Rylan nodded. "Agreed. Lexia, I need you to coordinate the runners. If we move supplies through the tunnels, we can avoid guild patrols." Lexia flicked her gaze up from the table, her fingers stilling. "And if they catch one of us?" Rylan's jaw tightened. "They won't. We only use those we trust, and no one knows more than they need to." His gaze swept across them. "This is our moment. If we do this right, the guilds will never see us coming." Marta sighed but nodded. Phelan gave a curt dip of his head. Lexia exhaled slowly, but determination burned in her eyes. The resistance had its leaders. Now it had a plan. The candlelight flickered, casting jagged shadows across the stone walls. Rylan's voice was steady, but there was no softness in it. "If someone gets caught," he said, his green eyes sweeping across the room, "we leave them behind." Silence settled over the group like a shroud. Marta shifted, her arms tightening over her chest. Phelan's expression remained unreadable, but Lexia's lips parted, as if she wanted to protest. No one did. "This isn't a game," Rylan continued, his voice sharpening. "If the guilds capture one of us, they'll break them, and once they do, they'll come for the rest of us. We can't risk a rescue. We can't risk exposure. If someone falls, we move forward." Lexia swallowed hard. "So we just, what? Pretend they never existed?" Rylan's jaw tightened. "We make sure their sacrifice means something." He leaned forward, both hands pressing against the table. "We move fast. We move quiet. We don't take risks we don't have to. But if one of us falls, the rest must keep going." Marta exhaled through her nose, nodding slightly. Phelan barely moved, but the flicker of approval in his gaze told Rylan he understood. Lexia hesitated before giving a small nod, though her hands curled into fists against her lap. "This is how we win," Rylan said, his voice low but certain. "Not by heroics, by strategy, by making sure that no matter what happens, the resistance survives." No one spoke after that. The truth was heavy, but it had to be carried. Rylan crouched over the map, his fingers tracing the inked lines of Oswagonia's streets, alleys, and hidden arteries. The candle beside him flickered, casting wavering light over the worn parchment. He exhaled slowly, eyes narrowing as he followed the supply routes marked in red. Every shipment, every merchant tied to the guilds, there were patterns, weak points waiting to be exploited. His gaze shifted to the sewer system sketched beneath the city's layout, a network of tunnels forgotten by all but those who needed them most. If used wisely, they could be the key to striking without warning and vanishing before the guilds even knew what hit them. He tapped a point near the docks. "This is where they process shipments before sending them through the city," he murmured to himself. "If we hit them here, supplies get delayed. Enough disruptions, and their hold weakens." His finger slid further inland, stopping at a crossroad where several trade routes merged. "Here, this is where they redistribute goods to their lackeys. If we strike this point, we cut off their distribution." He leaned back, mind racing. Supply sabotage wouldn't just hurt the guilds, it would force them to overextend, stretch their forces thin, leaving gaps in their security. Rylan's jaw tightened. "We don't need to fight them head on," he whispered. "We just need to make them bleed, slowly, methodically." With that, he began marking the first targets. The guilds had ruled unchecked for too long. That was about to change. Rylan studied the map, but his mind stretched beyond ink and parchment. The guilds ruled through fear, keeping the people too afraid to fight back. They thrived on order, structure, and routine. Their strength wasn't just in wealth and numbers, but in predictability. That was their weakness. He exhaled slowly, his fingers drumming against the table. The guilds expected rebellion to come in open defiance, a mob in the streets, banners waving. They were prepared for force. But they weren't prepared for ghosts. Strikes that came from nowhere, attacks that left no trace of their origins. "We don't fight them where they expect," he muttered, eyes scanning the key locations. "We don't let them dictate the battle." Their bureaucracy slowed them. Every order needed approval. Every decision trickled down through layers of control. If supply chains faltered, their structure would waver. If their enforcers were forced to spread thin, their grip would loosen. He leaned over the map and began marking new targets. Not just supply caches, but the guild's communication hubs, tax offices, and safe houses. "Hit fast. Disappear faster," Rylan whispered. "Make them chase shadows. Make them question everything." He sat back, heart steady, mind clear. Fear was the guild's weapon, but fear could be turned against them. If the rebellion moved faster than they could react, struck where they least expected, then even the mightiest empire could crumble. And Rylan would be the one to start the fall. Rylan tightened the strap of his cloak as he stood in the shadows, watching the guild's supply convoy trundle through the narrow streets. Lantern light flickered against the wooden crates stacked high on the wagons, grain, textiles, and weapons, all bound for the guild-controlled districts. The merchants and guards moved with routine precision, their confidence rooted in the guild's unchecked authority. They had no idea they were already losing control. He turned to Marta, crouched beside him in the alley's darkness. "We take the lead wagon. No bodies, no noise. We make it look like a mistake, a delay. Nothing that raises alarms, just enough to set them off balance." Marta smirked, her dagger already in hand. "Subtle. I can manage that." Rylan gave a curt nod, then signaled to Lexia and Phelan, waiting near the sewer entrance. They had their own task, planting false trade documents in the guild's offices, spreading misinformation that would send their enforcers scrambling in the wrong direction. The guilds thrived on order. If Rylan and his people chipped away at that, doubt and paranoia would do the rest. The convoy halted briefly at a crossroads, waiting for clearance from a city watch patrol. That was their moment. Rylan moved like a shadow, silent and swift. The first strike against the guild had begun. They would never see it coming. The smell of salt and tar thickened the air as Rylan crouched behind a stack of crates, watching the guild's warehouse loom against the night sky. Lanterns flickered along the docks, their glow barely cutting through the thick mist rolling off the water. Marta and Phelan were already in position, blending into the shifting shadows of the dock workers, their concealed blades ready. Lexia crouched beside him, her fingers gripping a flask of oil so tightly that her knuckles turned white. "Once this starts, we don't have long," she whispered. Rylan nodded, his breath steady. "We make it look like an accident. Fire spreads fast in these old docks. Once the first flame takes, the wind will do the rest." With a quick gesture, they moved. Marta slipped a dagger under a distracted guard's ribs, easing his body into the shadows. Phelan disappeared into the side entrance, his task clear: scatter the goods, spill the oil, create chaos from the inside. Rylan worked quickly, pouring oil over stacked crates, stuffing the gaps with kindling. Lexia followed, her hands shaking as she set the final flask at the base of a cart loaded with grain. Rylan struck the flint, and the tiny spark bloomed into a crawling flame. Shouts erupted inside the warehouse as Phelan overturned barrels and sent sacks of flour bursting into the air. Then the fire caught. Within moments, smoke billowed from the building, the flames licking hungrily at the wooden beams. Alarms rang out. The guild's enforcers rushed toward the blaze. But it was too late. The inferno was spreading, devouring their stockpiles. Rylan turned, his heart pounding. "Move!" They slipped into the alleys as chaos erupted behind them, the firelight casting monstrous shadows across the docks. The guild had just suffered its first true wound, and Rylan knew this was only the beginning. The tavern was silent, save for the distant creak of wood settling under the weight of years. Dust hung in the air, disturbed only by the flickering candlelight that cast restless shadows along the cracked walls. Rylan sat hunched over the battered table, tracing the routes on the map before him, mind turning as fast as the flames had spread through the guild's warehouse. They had struck first, hard, but victory was a fleeting thing. The guild would answer, and when they did, it would be with fury. Marta sat across from him, sharpening her dagger, the soft rasp of metal against stone filling the quiet. "They won't take this lightly," she said, voice cool, unreadable. "We embarrassed them." "That was the point," Rylan muttered, though the weight in his chest told him he couldn't afford arrogance. "But it means we don't have time to celebrate." His fingers drummed against the table. "They'll lock the city down, start hunting in the places they think we hide. We have to move before they corner us." Phelan stood near the boarded-up window, peering through the cracks. "Then we hit them again before they can regroup." Rylan exhaled slowly, rubbing a hand over his jaw. Every action had a cost. The rebellion was no longer whispers in the dark, it was real. That meant people would suffer. His grip tightened on the edge of the table. "We stay ahead of them. No hesitation, no second guessing. If we slow down now, we lose everything." Marta nodded. Phelan said nothing, but the look in his eyes meant he understood. The war had begun. Now they had to survive it. The scent of fresh bread clung to the air as Rylan stepped into the dimly lit bakery. The warmth from the ovens was a sharp contrast to the cold tension tightening his shoulders. The baker, a stout man with flour dusting his arms, turned from kneading dough, his sharp eyes locking onto Rylan's. "You're the one they whisper about," the baker said, wiping his hands on his apron. "The one who set the fire." Rylan's posture remained steady, but his pulse quickened. He didn't confirm it. He didn't have to. The baker huffed, glancing toward the front of the shop where customers bustled, unaware of the quiet rebellion brewing in the back. "The guilds take their cut, leave us with scraps," he muttered. "People are starving while they feast." His fingers curled into fists, flour smudging his knuckles. "I've had enough." Rylan studied him, searching for hesitation. He found none. "This isn't just about revenge," he said carefully. "It's about crippling them, making sure they can't keep choking the city." The baker nodded. "Then you'll need more than fighters. You'll need food, safe houses, quiet hands willing to help where they can." His eyes darkened. "I can be one of those hands." Rylan exhaled, tension easing slightly. The rebellion wasn't just growing in the shadows, it was rising in the streets, in the homes of those tired of kneeling. More than bread was baking in Oswegonia. A revolution was rising. The heavy quiet of the cellar was broken only by the drip of water somewhere in the darkness and the rasp of Rylan's breath. Gerrod found him there, away from the low murmur of the main group upstairs. His shoulders slumped under a weight heavier than mere fatigue. Lines of strain etched deep around Rylan's eyes, stark in the lantern's flickering glow. The map before him told a grim story. "Trouble?" Gerrod asked quietly, stepping fully into the light. Rylan didn't look up immediately. His finger traced one of the red crosses near the guild quarter boundary. "Trouble," he confirmed, his voice rough. He finally lifted his gaze, and Gerrod saw the exhaustion warring with frustration there. "It's the walls, Gerrod. We're losing people." He tapped another cross near the Brine Ward gate. "Marta's team tried to cross last night, needed to get supplies from the docks. Only 2 made it back. Said the guards were waiting somehow." He rubbed his temples, a deep sigh escaping him. "And young Finn, caught trying to scale the Hearth District wall near the old mill 2 nights ago. Just gone. No word." Gerrod frowned, stepping closer to the map. He had crossed those sections himself, albeit with extreme caution. The patrols are predictable there, if you watch long enough. How are they being caught? Rylan ran a hand through his hair, agitation clear in the movement. "They're trying. Gods know they are. Some use the sewer routes you pointed out. Others try climbing, timing the shift changes like we discussed. But," he slammed a fist lightly on the table, "it's not working often enough. They get seen, they make noise, they hesitate. Fear makes them clumsy. And the cost?" His voice dropped. "People are scared, Gerrod. They see the walls, and they see a death sentence. We need to move supplies, messengers, fighters, but every crossing feels like a gamble with lives we can't afford to lose." Gerrod fell silent, studying the map, then Rylan's strained face. He had navigated the walls using instincts honed over a lifetime in the wild. Skills so ingrained he hadn't consciously analyzed them as teachable techniques. He saw the patrols, the timing, the blind spots as elements of terrain, obstacles to be understood and bypassed, not impenetrable barriers of state control. They see the stone, Gerrod murmured, thinking aloud. The guards, the authority. They don't see the gaps. Rylan stared at him, a flicker of something, maybe understanding, maybe desperation in his eyes. You make it sound simple. It's not simple, Gerrod corrected gently. It requires patience, observation, discipline. Knowing when to move is more important than knowing how fast. He paused. You've seen me cross. Rylan admitted. Like smoke, like you weren't even there. I thought it was just you, something you could do that others couldn't. He leaned forward, his voice dropping, earnest now. But if it's something that can be learned, Gerrod, we need it. We need that different way of seeing. You look at those walls, and you see paths. My people look, and they see the end of the road. He gestured helplessly at the map. Can you teach them? Show them how to find the gaps? How to move like you do? Gerrod considered Rylan's plea. This wasn't just about fighting the Meister anymore. It was about empowering these people, giving them the tools to navigate the very system designed to crush them. It was a deeper commitment, a different kind of fight. He thought of the fear he'd seen in the rebels' eyes, the grim resolve hardening beneath it. They deserved a chance. He met Rylan's desperate gaze and gave a slow, firm nod. I can show them what I know, he said. How to watch the patterns, how to use the shadows, how to time their movements to the city's own breath, not just the guards' footsteps. He straightened, his own resolve solidifying. But it won't be easy for them. They'll need to unlearn their fear, learn patience they've never had. It will take practice. Constant practice. Relief washed over Rylan's face, so profound it almost looked like pain. They'll do it, he promised, his voice thick with renewed hope. If there's a way, they'll learn. Just tell us where to begin. Gerrod glanced back at the map, his mind already shifting from fighter to tracker to teacher. Gather those who need to cross most urgently. We start tonight, on the rooftops where we can watch unseen.
The rebellion has drawn first blood. The guild's warehouse burns, a symbol of their power turning to ash. Rylan has found his voice, and the people have found their courage. But they have made a grave mistake. They have embarrassed the most powerful men in the city. The guilds will retaliate, and their fury will be swift and merciless. Can this fledgling rebellion survive the coming storm? And what new allies or enemies will emerge from the shadows? Find out next time in Chapter 6, A Thief's Redemption. The fire is lit. Subscribe and see if it can survive the darkness.